welcome to the gardener's world. They say that for those born when the sun is in Cancer, they are always home-loving. And there's no doubt about it that home at this time of year, if you have a garden, is where you want to be. And here in the cottage garden, it's reached new heights. All these pinks and mauves and lilacs sifting and dancing and weaving together are a complete joy. This week we're paying our final visit to Sissinghurst Castle in Kent to find out how the team are getting on as they work to reconnect the garden with Vita Sackville-West's original vision.
We recently unearthed this really amazing photograph in Vita and Harold's time of this vista in the rose garden. For me it just instantly says beauty and romance.
And in the fourth and last film of Carol's series, Finding the Right Plant for the Right Place, she's been to East Sussex to look at plants that thrive in coastal gardens.
This is a sea holly. It can withstand any amount of hot sun and driving wind. It's perfectly at home here.
And I shall be harvesting garlic, new potatoes, lettuce, broad beans, beetroot, all for a birthday feast. It's sad, but the oriental poppies have come to an end. Now, obviously, the annual poppies, the opium poppies, are just kicking in, and they're fantastic. But the oriental poppies, which are herbaceous and come back year after year, have done their stuff. And it's taking up space without any flowers. And they can be cajoled into a second performance. If I take that stake out and cut this back, that will regrow and there's a real chance of reflowering in September. So the thing to do is to cut back hard. And I'm going to go right down to the base and cut there. Now, having created some space, I need plants to fill it. I've got some annuals that I've grown from seed. And if you haven't grown any from seed yourself, and these are annuals, they will flower until the cold stops them, and that's it, then they come out. Whereas the poppy is about 3 or 4 years old and will come back next year in full, glorious, silky, flamboyant colour. Right, let's get this to Tithonius. Other plants that I use for exactly this purpose are zinnias, dahlias, cannas. Now these are all plants that are tender, come from near the equator, and will grow and flower really vibrantly right up until it gets too cold. So although it looks a bit bare now, go with it. Plant up, and then the garden will look so much better for it towards the end of summer and into autumn.
Romance and sea. We did find that of Vita's nearly 300 roses that she grew here, we only really had about 100 of her collection still. We really set about trying to bring them back to Sissinghurst. So, we're bringing in lots of old roses, but we're also bringing in new roses. This is called Eglantine. And it just has the appearance and the look of an old rose, and it just fits in quite well with the old roses around it. We recently unearthed this really amazing photograph in Vita and Harold's time of this vista in the rose garden. For me it just instantly says beauty and romance. It's an avenue of cherry trees actually down either side, and the path that we're walking on was a turf path. So here I'm really very tempted to want to recreate the idea of the dappled lights through the canopy of trees onto this grass. It would be just a magical experience. bearded iris are really the shooting stars of the plant world, and very much like the old roses here at Sissinghurst, they arrive in one brief but glorious moment. And Vita loved them. She loved their intricate beauty, she loved their historical connections, and she loved their intense colouring. And she amassed about 100 bearded iris, which we now have only about 60 of, so we're on the hunt for around 40 missing irises. Now 3 years into the project. It's tangible, actually, I think, not just the support we're getting from visitors and volunteers, but actually people seem to be kind of in a state of excitement that there's changes here, there's improvements in planting there, there's a whole batch of new roses flowering there. I think that excites people because, you know, sentimental though we all are about gardens and plants, we also like to see change and we like to understand how gardens grow and evolve. And I think for too long, actually, Sissinghurst hasn't changed in the ways that it had to do to really keep going and remain relevant. We need to grow and develop, and so people are really enjoying this.
I've been to Sissinghurst many times, but and be inspired once again by what is truly one of the great gardens of the world. Right, first good news. It's time to harvest garlic. Garlic planted in September or early October is normally ready for harvesting by midsummer, and homegrown garlic is a lovely thing. The bad news is that last year, when I was harvesting the garlic, I found onion white rot, and that is a disaster for all allium crops, because it stays in the soil, it rots the neck, and you can end up with a mushy, rotten bulb, whether it be a leek, a shallot, a garlic, any of the allium family. So what I did was sow my garlic this year, or plant it rather, in a container. This is an old cattle trough, and I used a mixture of garden compost, bought peat-free compost, and lots of grit to give it good drainage. Now these are new varieties I've never grown before. This is Red Duke, which is supposed to be a little bit spicier than a lot of garlic. Never ever pull garlic up by the stem. Always dig it up, and that's true for onions too, because you want as much root on it as possible. And then you dry it with the roots on, and that stops any damage to the basal plate which the root's attached to. Then you can trim the roots when it's properly dry. Shake that off. And keep all top growth on it. When you store it, you want to store it with as much on it as possible and dry it. And if you want to know when to harvest your garlic, as a rule of thumb, when the foliage starts to yellow naturally, it's time to lift it. But you can see that's a perfectly good garlic. Now, here we are. Have a look at this. You can see the fungal spores on there, the white rot. The roots are broken and not growing properly. The top is starting to rot and look bad. And what happens is you get this slimy, rotten outer layer. If you just found one like this, burn it, dig the soil out, get rid of that, bring fresh soil in, and you might be able to stop it. The fact is it's endemic in this garden now, but we can eat that fresh. So we'll put that to one side. It is disappointing that this garden has become infected, and as onion white rot is soil-borne, it is possible. Okay, there's a Red Duke, of which only one seems to have been afflicted. However, it's very likely the spores are on all of them. So, just because there's no sign of it, it doesn't mean to say that it might not appear later during their storage period. But this other variety, the other side of the central bar, extra early white, clearly is in not such good shape. Now this one, you can see the top has rotted right back and the clove has opened out and is a little bit slimy. Onion white rot and the fungal problems that the allium family get don't transfer to other families. So now, for example, I could top this up with a little bit of compost, plant some lettuce, some French beans, parsley, basil, and they will all grow well and crop well for the rest of the summer. I have to say, although they may not store as well, I will eat all those and they will taste delicious, I'm sure. Now, as well as being the season for lifting garlic, here are other jobs that are timely this weekend. At this time of year, with lush growth being battered by wind and rain, plants can fall all over the place and they certainly need rescuing. But the trick is to make it look as natural as possible. So get your support in place, and then, like putting flowers into a vase, let them fall a bit so that they look natural. It is tempting to leave masses of young fruit, particularly apples, developing on the tree. But to maximise your harvest, it's important to thin them now, leaving just 2 fruits to each spur. This way, you get a good crop of high-quality apples rather than a mass of low-quality fruit. We all know that we should be deadheading roses, but actually almost any flowers can usefully be deadheaded, particularly if they've been spent or they've been damaged by the weather. Cut back to a side shoot and they'll quickly regrow, carrying fresh new blooms. These fuchsias I bought 3-4 years ago to plant exactly on this spot, and they didn't work at all well. However, this year, because it's been mild and it's been damp, they've loved it. There will be a plant that likes whatever weather we're having, even if we don't like it. And fuchsias love moist air, light shade, and mild temperatures. And it's just finding the right spot for a plant. Now, Carol Holmes can thrive whatever the given conditions. This time, she's gone to the seaside.
The plants that live by the seaside have tiny little flowers, but this is an exception. This is Glossium flavor, the horned poppy. It gets its name from these great long seed pods. But you look at these flowers and you think, how can that flower possibly withstand these belting winds and this hot burning sun? But unlike this, a real touch of a seaside in your very own garden. And you know what? It's the right plant in the right place.
Always be more healthy. It's extraordinary how a plant that is in exactly the right spot will be more resilient for every kind of pest and disease. And sometimes they tell you where they want to be in your garden rather than you selecting that perfect spot. These primroses, this is Primula florinda, which I intended to put in the damp garden because they like damp conditions and that would suit. But there was no space, it was the wrong time of year. So I lined them out along the edge here, intending to grow them on and then move them. And ever since then, they have just flourished. They are completely at home here. They do not want to go to the damp garden, even though I would like them in there. So, they've chosen their home, not me, and that's where they'll stay. Today is my birthday, and one of the traditions that's evolved over the years is that I harvest my first early potatoes on my birthday. Some years I have a bumper crop, and some years a few little marble-sized spuds to celebrate with. Now this year I planted some in a bag at Easter, which is a traditional time to plant potatoes, and I put 2 in one bag and 1 in the other. Now, because it was Easter, it was cold, I kept them both in the greenhouse. But after about a month, one bag I put outside. And that was this one here. But we'll see how they... So let's start with this one, which was in the greenhouse. So we can pull that up. And then what I'll do is tip it out into the barrow. And there's a lot of compost in here because I topped it up as I went along instead of earthing it up. There we go. Right. Let's have a look. Or I shan't go hungry tonight, at least. So, that's new potatoes, Duke of York, fairly good size. Exhibit A. Now for Exhibit B, which remember was put outside about sort of the end of April, early May, after the last risk of frost went. Tip it out. If I put these at this end, if we lift that up, we can see we're indoors and had 2 seed potatoes. Exhibit B, which was largely grown outside and only had 1, is less, but not that much less. So what I would deduce from that, and this is not a serious trial, is that as long as they're protected from frost, there's not much advantage in growing them in a greenhouse. Put them outside, earth them up so that the tubers don't get frosted, and the tops are slightly protected, and you'll get a perfectly good harvest. Well, that's the result of my effort to grow spuds in a bag. I know many of you have tried it too, so do let us know how you got on. If you go to our website, you can either drop us an email or go to our Facebook page, and if you can send a picture, so much the better. Now, it's good to have some potatoes this day of all days, but not enough. I want to see what else I can have for my birthday treat. Come on now, Nelly. Don't need that basket. I love broad beans when they're young and sweet. Now let's have some beetroot. Small but delicious. Well, that's the main course sorted. Now let's get some pudding. Come on, Nelly. Now's your chance. Come on. Good girl. There's a good girl. Thank you. That's really good because I can put raspberries in there. Good girl. I know everybody loves strawberries and cream and sees it as a big treat, but for me, raspberries are the real treat. And they're just beginning to ripen. They're so good. Now, that's it for today. And next week, we're back on Wednesday, not Friday, a couple of days earlier. But we are on at our normal time of 8:30. So, see you next Wednesday. Till then.